introduction for yourselves? If we start with Raed.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everybody. My name is Raed Alammari. I come with almost 20 years of experience in banking, investment, and asset management, focusing mainly on business development. A couple of years back, I've decided to let go of overlooking and managing investments of other investors and try to sleep well at night. So I've decided to move on and handle my own waste management and environmental platform. But in only 3 years' time, I had to come back again to the business again, and now I'm running a family office of one of the well-known businessmen in Saudi Arabia. So the whole 20 years experience I've been having over there was mainly focusing on how to build up the teams and how to make sure that there is synergy among the teams, despite the digitalization move that we're going through today, and how important is that aspect. So I look forward for the panel.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sami Carouba. I have 25 years of experience within the MENA region, managing several multinationals within Middle East and Africa. I've decided, like him, a couple of years ago, to open up my own consultancy firm that deals with families. Having seen amongst different cultures, different families, their ways of progressing, their way of succession, their way of constitutions, I'm trying to help into that specific area in the family constitution, just to raise the bar amongst the region for a greater and greater successions and bigger families amongst the region. Thank you all.
Trying to give a short version of what we've been doing for the past 28 years. It's going to be challenging. 28 years being a banker, software engineer, been working Citibank for about 15 years, locally, regionally, internationally as well, covered risk management, businesses, corporate, treasury, and retail banking, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Went on to Islamic banking by choice, to Dubai Bank, which was acquired by Emirates NBD, worked over there as a global head for Islamic banking. Left them and then joined a family office at Serkal Group. So I work as an independent board member over there, advise the chairman. Also chair a couple of schools. We're part of the school where we have around 50,000 students, and we also work on various things with the Ministry of Economy in terms of the venture studios we're building and advising them on that. We're working on a metaverse and a circular economy, because the businesses of Serkal Company actually has a lot of verticals. We'll talk about them as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I'll introduce myself. Caroline Langston. I've been an executive coach for the last 12 years. I've been working with families across the world in the Middle East and Asia. I'm actually coming from Hong Kong, but originally British. I suppose my job involves working towards an outcome and a goal, which is positive, and driving my families forwards and my clients forwards to a better future. So I'm going to ask some questions now, and it would be great if we can talk about the problem very briefly, but what I'm looking at is really what you guys see as solutions, okay, moving forwards. So if I ask my first question, and I'll direct that to Maha? Okay. What have been the major changes and challenges that you've seen relating to digitalization within family office or within family-run businesses? And I would like to look at how we are driving this forwards and the communication between the current gen and the next gen as well.
Sure. Digital, I think it's a problem. It's a global phenomenon, not only to family offices. If you today look at some of the stats, we'll give you only two of them. 60-70% recognize the need for actually transferring and being digital. Only 40, depending on the regions you are in, only 40 to 50% are actually doing anything about digital at this point of time. So family offices are actually suffering a lot from digital because there's a disconnect between the next gen and the new gen as well. Going to the solution, I think it's more importantly to think about is how the family offices can seek help from outside. Because if you just look within the family offices themselves, for most of them, you don't have the expertise. Now, I'd like to put up a disclaimer over here. When we talk about all these stats and information provided, we don't talk about the outliers. You've got outliers on the right side, which is very tiny. You've got outside with the negative on the, what do you call, on the left side. We're talking about the bulk of the people in between, the 70, 80, 60% of them. Today, the family offices are with challenges in how to transform and how to digitize these things. One of the first early things we need to do is, depending on the maturity of the family businesses, understand what is it you want to do. You need to create alignment. So what is it the next we want to do? Once you understand what you want to do, you also need to understand why you want to do it. A lot of us just go and struggle on getting things done just because we're copycatting. And I don't think this would make any sense, because every family office is different than others, and regions are different, and maturities are different. So understanding what and why, then you come to the how you will do it. What we did, actually, we brought the leadership of the company. We told them what we want to do. Of course, the family office I'm talking about, it's been there for the last 165 years. So it's very old, pioneer, have done a lot of things for the country in terms of instilling a lot of infrastructure-related things. So they have certain maturity. So when we brought the leadership, we asked them, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to be? So align the thoughts, put the purpose correctly, and ask them, come up with a solution, how do we move forward? So you won't believe it, anonymously, everybody talked about how do we move and digitize our operation. So that entails that, first of all, you need to change the way you're working in terms of your processes. You cannot digitize a broken process, which even a lot of big corporates fall into that trap. Everybody rush in to digitize something which is broken. First, go back and make your processes agile. Revise those processes first, and then adopt and digitize them. But digitizing is not what you call a one thing done, like anything else. It's always an iterative things. Particularly technology today is like evolving every now and then. And we'll talk about the metaverse in a while, which is the fluff. But you have to be agile in whatever you do. So you have to have a milestone. The moment you reach a milestone, you need to constantly re-engineer, relook at your policies, relook at your processes, and how do you get people engaged.
Very similar to coaching. So this is what we work with, is goal setting and setting areas that you're going to move forwards to. But then within that, there is the communication as well, between the current gen and the next gen as well. And I'm quite interested to explore that as well. Sami?
Same question?
Yes, please. Is it working? There you go.
Yeah, just building on what Maher said, I don't think there is any two families that have the same circumstances. Each one of them has its own characteristics, its own history, and its own way of seeing the future. So the first most important thing is really to get the alignment done. And once this alignment is done, the critical part is the executional part. Because basically, most companies, they just want to follow the best or the other or whatever are the other companies doing because they think that it can be applicable to them. It's not. There aren't any two families that have the same background or the same way of looking at the future. In addition to this, the most critical part in this is really to influence the new generation. You need to understand what influences them. Because basically you can only influence them based on what they believe is an important aspect for them, an important thing for them that in their eyes, it holds the future for them and for the future families as well. Yeah.
Kind of interesting, a little bit about reverse mentoring as well. So actually, reverse mentoring is a new strategy that some of the big MNCs are taking on now, where the younger generation are actually mentoring and spending time mentoring the current gen as well. So, Raed.
Sure. I remember going over a comment related to the subject. Moving into digitalization is just like flying a plane while you're rebuilding it mid of the sky. So I believe that adopting digitalization in a startup family office might be much easier comparing when you go through a family office that has been working for decades and trying to transform them all the way to digitalization. One of the main challenges that we have faced at the beginning was basically the family itself had in mind that the importance of digitalizing their processes. But then the challenge comes of basically that they have been doing the work in a certain way for years, and now they want to see exactly the same thing being done through the systems itself. And then you get stuck in the middle between trying to explain or liaison between what can exactly be done through system and how that would be happening with the different and various tools over there, and convincing the family members or whomever has been working in the family offices this is basically the new way to do things. So the willingness is already there, but to get used to the new way to do it is basically where the challenge is. And to overcome this issue, this happened recently in our office, to overcome this issue, the benefit of segregating the ownership and the management comes in. So basically, if you have appointed a management in the office to decide on what to do exactly, and you're just an owner or family member, in that case, you have to step aside and let me do my own work. So sometimes you need to go with that aggressive move with the family members. And basically, we have seen the results over that. We've been discussing digitalizing the businesses and everything taking place in the office for almost 2.5 years. Until we took such a move, it took from us only 6 months to move on. And basically now half of our work has been already digitalized, and we're moving on gradually into that.
See, one of the things that you need to change and bring the change about in a family office or even a corporate is all about culture. When you join any organization, you always adapt to the culture you're in and the organization you're joining. And I used to really teach. So whenever somebody comes into Citibank, I was one who sent to go and talk to the new guys and talk to them about the culture of Citibank, for example, and similarly for other organizations. So one of the early things we did as well, along with the offsite meeting that we had with the leadership team, is what is the culture we want to build? And we asked them. And they came back with staggering things that we exactly wanted the same thing. And digital was one of them. How do we be a family-oriented business? Usually family have those values as well. And how to be agile. So agility was another value which was created because you need to be agile in terms of what's happening, the new things in the market. Third was about accountability. A lot of family offices are very emotionally driven. They're very nice. I mean, if you do something wrong, nothing happens to you. You'll stay there for 20 years. You'll stick around. So what happens then? You actually end up losing some talents. You won't be able to attract. So accountability is not there. So that's one of the things early on. Everybody spot on saying that we need to make sure that we have accountability. Now imagine when they came up with this thing, now it is on them to embrace it. When it comes from them, it's easier to implement.
Yeah, I agree, and I particularly like the part that you brought up, or the topic that you brought up around culture, because, and you said we have an embedded culture, certain cultures within certain organizations. So for example, I was brought into one of my families to look at culture, how we change that culture, what do they want to be, what are they really aiming for, what's next for them, and then start talking around how they start to embed that culture throughout and how resourceful that's going to be, not just now, but in 10 years' time as well, which is what we're looking at. And that brings me quite nicely onto the metaverse. And I'm really interested to hear from Maher about the fluff around the metaverse. Please.
It is a fluff. So if you guys don't think that, it is, so far it's a fluff. A lot of it is fluff. And that's who I'm coming from an engineering background. I used to program myself. I used to make games. For metaverse to work, the two universe has to meet to each other. The software, which is actually taking a leap all the time, and the physical part of the technology. We've already reached and broke the binary codes, the 0, 1s. So now we have a qubit, so we have 4 digits we can store. So your multiplication power, computing power has really increased with the vast computers you have. But you don't have the physical power to make the processing work. So Google ran an experiment back in Q4 2019 by calculating certain mathematical operation. And it took roughly a minute. If you would have taken the same calculation on a standard computer that we have today on the mega server, it will take roughly, the standard one, it will take roughly a million a year. You can see the difference. 1 minute to a million a year. But they had to shut down the computer, the new technology, because otherwise it would have burst because of heat, the heating processing power. Now, metaverse been there all along. It's just a new name being added. What is it, metaverse? Extended reality and virtual reality being combined together, just to make sure that we all decipher the metaverse things. We need to be very careful what metaverse is going to bring along. I was in a conference when Dubai launched the metaverse forum, and UAE was the first one to launch that thing. So I was in a workshop talking about how do we govern it. And I was also talking outside today in the morning, whether we require governance. A lot of people said, the metaverse will be regulated by people itself. I said, it's impossible. We, as a Homo sapiens, have always been given a book and guidance to follow. How is it that we will be able to regulate metaverse? What will happen? And they were not really agreeing to my viewpoint, and these people have the title of metaverse head. And I said, how long have you been having this title? 20 years. I said, but it just came in a year ago. So I said, okay, let's do an experiment. Let's remove the radars from the road. What will happen to us as Homo sapiens? Let's take a notch higher. Let's remove the traffic lights from the roads. Another control. What will happen? I said, it'll be chaos. So we have to make sure that we govern the metaverse. What we're doing about metaverse, learning what's going on. In the schools I chair as a board, education is one of the, I think, sector has not developed. Every other sector globally have really progressed for the past 50, 100, 200 years, except education. Of course, there are certain attempts in terms of like Montessori, IB curriculum doing very well, but education system as a mainstream did not really develop. So one of the things we're trying to do is, how do we fix the angle between the children and the school and the parents? The parents are disconnected. So one of the things we're trying to do is, how do we create snippets of, for the parents, where they can actually see it in a virtual reality, understand what we are teaching the children today. So they can see it on their spare time, get into this metaverse, so-called, and learn exactly the same thing. And for you to change these things, and I was talking to His Excellency Abdullah bin Dog, what is it we need to do about metaverse, about circular economy, and also the family offices support. I said, we need to create programs and curate programs for university students and also for schools. So we're already done with the university students, with the AUS. I'm working with one professor over there, but we need to now create programs to go back and put it in the schools so we can change the next generation. Because anything you need to change, it takes 1.6 generation for it to become part of the DNA. So what we're trying to do with the metaverse.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, metaverse, as Mahi was saying, I mean, is just a new word of the evolving technology. It does not apply in the same way to all businesses. And businesses needs to be careful when they talk metaverse and I want to apply metaverse. I mean, what is it? How would it apply? And I strongly believe that without certain sets of rules and regulations, it might affect our humanity. And that's the main challenge that I'm seeing in the quick evolution of technology.
Yeah, and I agree. How it affects humanity as well is going to be interesting. As a VR person myself, I have Oculus. I spend a fair amount of time in it myself. And I can see how that might envelop certain people and how that might actually change the way we communicate with each other. Or, on the other side as well, how it might actually increase the way we communicate with each other. For example, being able to communicate across borders as if we are in the same room. And I'm interested to see how that actually changes us as a human race moving forwards. Okay.
So there are a couple of points we have been looking at. Been looking at it from our perspective. The first one is basically, whether we like it or not, we have to admit that it is a new thing happening, and it is very obvious it's gonna be dominating the spectrum that we are operating at. And the second thing is basically we don't understand it at all. We don't come from technology background. We have been trying to understand, we have been reading about it, we have been looking at it, discussing it with others, and we just couldn't understand what exactly is happening in that universe. So we had to move to stage 2, or option 2, which is basically two folds. The first one, start actively attending different conferences across the globe, just to try to understand what's happening, talking to people, and making sure we're not talking to people of the same age or with the same experience we're having. We started basically at 50 and 60 and 40 years old, talking to 20 years old crowd, just to have an understanding of what's happening there. And the second thing we've done is basically we start opening up to looking at different opportunities that comes across the table, whether investments or whatsoever, to make sure that we have a better understanding of how the dynamics and the structure of a metaverse or any new trend in the technology. Now, having said that, if you're going to ask me today, what is metaverse and what is it about, I'm still learning into that area. But we have it in front of us that this is something that we have to know, we have to understand. Eventually, it's going to be a fact that we're going to be facing.
Yeah, and again, yes, absolutely. I believe as well. I'm working with people within technology as an executive coach, and it's coming, ready or not, and it will be here. So the more we learn about it now, the more future-proof we're going to be, and the better understanding we're going to have, and the better we're going to be able to communicate with future generations moving forwards about this, so our next gen. So really having a deeper understanding of what's going to happen next is going to protect us going forwards. Okay. I would like to ask Raed this because you were saying that you are involved in environmentalism, is that right? Yes. Okay, so how is your next generation reaching global environmental issues? How are you actually communicating that at the moment? There's been a few interesting reports come out. Deloitte report came out and said that Gen Z are most interested in environmental issues and what the organizations they work with and the people that they partner with are doing around ESG and those kind of issues. I would love to hear from you.
I'll try to simplify as much as possible. It's a very dear and close subject to me personally. So when we have been going through debates and discussion among the different family members, not only in our family office, I'm talking about the community itself overall within Saudi Arabia. All generations have a certain mindset towards environment. They are used, for example, to print a 100-page report just to read 10 pages of that, and then they just throw the rest of it. As simple as that. And then we're having the new generation coming in with all the beliefs and thoughts and enthusiasm about environment and the global environmental issues and the global warming and so on and so forth. So basically, we're lucky being in a family that is today tapping into the 4th generation. And we're still having people from the 2nd generation in charge, getting into debates with people from the 3rd and 4th generation and start talking about the environmental related subjects on frequent basis. So what we have been doing recently is basically, in order to overcome the obstacles, if we would say obstacles for the old generation to understand or to deal with the environmental issue within the family office itself, we have been organizing several workshops or conferences among the family members themselves to discuss different topics. And we make sure that the new generation decides a certain items of the agenda discussion, and they go on the present and debate with the family members. So basically, it is more of an educational process that we're taking through the whole family itself. And then we go back to the offices and look at the different transactions or investments or opportunities that comes across, and we put a certain criteria for investing in for making evaluation from an environmental perspective and environmental impact of those transactions over there. Now, the good thing that the entire family is basically taking this into consideration. It's a matter of how we can implement that into our ecosystem internally. So we have tried to make it hybrid between the both levels, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation, where each one of them is basically cooperating to achieve to that end. Is it at the end of the day something that we have to face and we have to take into consideration? Then definitely it's yes, and everybody is taking that into consideration. It is a matter how we're tackling it at the end of the day.
Historically, that challenge was not there for the businesses. However, as generations started evolving, they started talking about it. And they started feeling that it needs to be embedded within their systems, within the way they conduct business. The future ones are even more, more interested about having every single part of their process environmentally correct. So as much as some businesses still look at it from a cost perspective, cost-benefit perspective, I strongly believe it should be part of the process itself, because longer term, it has to be in the future. And I strongly believe also that without certain sets of rules and regulations that at least guide the big picture within these families and companies, lots of them would still have a leeway of not looking at it and leaving it for the future generations, which I strongly believe is not the right thing. The sooner you do it, the sooner you embed this into your whole overall ecosystem, the better it is.
Yeah, and end to end as well. Because what's happening now, and I'm lucky enough to work with some family offices, which are quite large, and I work with the younger members of the teams as well, is they are making decisions based on this now. On the future of themselves within this organization, the future of themselves within your family even, you know. So this is something that we really need to address very seriously from end to end.
I think the ESG is taking really steam globally, as we can all see. Just give a number of stats on the funds which people allocated in European market in 2020, just during pandemic itself. 60% were allocated to ESG-related matter funds. So globally, it's gaining steam. I think UAE is in the forefront and working on ESG. I think working on the climate change and circular economy, it's both. We have Ministry of Climate Change and also Ministry of Economy is working very hard on it. Coming back to our family office, I think we have realized that very early on. So we have a very important vertical on waste management and circular economy. In 1992, we actually introduced and helped with the government introduce legislation on how do we control waste getting generated from food establishments. All those wastes, the fat and oil and grease, used to go into the municipal lines and used to clog them. And usually it's anything between 100 million dirham to 150 million dirham per year you have to really spend to unclog these lines. So when the talk started in 1992, nobody even was talking in this region about, coming up with legislation on those kind of things. So then we zap in 8 years, in the year 2000, we started working on putting up legislations with the government, with the respective municipalities, which was affirmed and put in over there. We installed the first grease trap, which collect all the grease from the food establishment in 2005. Fast forward as well, we've put in the first plant to get all this, what you call grease, dumped in a plant, which is called Enviral, and get them treated. And a byproduct comes out of it, which is real cradle to cradle. We talk about sustainability, but I think that's an old version of what you call climate change and circular economy. It's all about cradle to cradle, which has been steaming up in the 5 years, for example. As we speak, we pioneered that technology. Today, we are the only one in the Middle East can do that thing. We attend IFAT, which is in Germany, which is related to waste management and also circular economy. We haven't yet come across a technology which was developed in-house over here in UAE. As we speak, we're also collaborating with CERC, which is one of the companies under PIF in Saudi Arabia. And we're also trying to put up a plant over there. I'm also joining Your Excellency in the Indonesia trip. UAE delegation, we're meeting the Minister of Public and Work over there, also to promote this technology. We've been invited by them directly, by the embassy, so we can also share what are we doing over here.
Just to add up to what Maher is saying, as we speak now, I think there is a conference in Sharjah led by Her Excellency Mariam Lemheri on circular economy to formalize more the rules and regulations for the future generations in UAE.
And just to add, there are 22 policies the UAE is working on circular economy. We were lucky enough to receive these policies, to review them and provide our feedback. Our recommendation was to create an advisory board and create an executive committee so we can make sure that we involve the private practitioners and along with the government so we can take this to the fruition.
And really be invested in this and not greenwash. It's very important. Okay. Finally, and then I'll put this to all of you, what do you think we can do differently to continue creating alignment between ourselves or the next generation and the current gen in order to ensure success going forwards? And I'm interested to hear about any of the areas you have particular interest in.
So the first thing is basically to make sure of involving the new gens into the decision-making process of the family office and into the day-to-day activities of the family office, holding them accountable, coaching them all the time. Not to be spoiled just being part of a family office or so, or being part of a wealthy family. That's the first part. The second thing is basically to make sure before any individual joins and working in the family office itself, with the family itself, to have a significant experience outside the family itself, to have an understanding of what's happening outside the family office, and then come back and basically transferring that knowledge internally. Embracing coaching of all the new gens is being open to talk to the new generation despite the gap in the age or the experience whatsoever, in order to prepare them for the next phase. Last but not least, and this is an experimentation that we have seen ourselves, sometimes the existing generation, from their experience, they are sure a mistake will take place if any of the new generation taking action in certain ways. Sometimes you don't need to intervene from the beginning and basically give them the right way to do it. Let them go and experience that themselves. And then sit afterward, debate and discuss what have you learned out of that experience. By having that kind of exercise, we have seen silos has been broken between the different generations, and they became more aligned together.
Okay, and that's creating psychological safety for the next generation to make a mistake, maybe, and as long as it's not a big one, but
Definitely.
allow them to learn from their
them
mistakes, and that's
experience.
something that we don't do so often. Yeah, for sure.
Again, historically, by default, anyone from the family should join the family business. Not sure that this is the right definition. They really need to be involved. They really need to like to be in the family. They really need to have something to add to the family. And they really need their aspirations to be met within that family for them to be able to exploit really their full potential. The main challenges that we are seeing in families is, as I said, by default, they are within the family. They are being set certain KPIs or certain jobs to do. But in reality, is this what they want? Is this what aspires them? Is their voice heard? Would they be able to exploit their own way of doing things? The main challenge is, as you rightly said, Caroline, is the alignment, is making their voices heard, making their way of thinking closer to the older and to their eventually next gen that is coming. If there isn't that mentoring and that advising between these, many things would be lost and many generations would not be even open to speak up freely with their elders or their...
And I agree, and I think it's actually catching it early enough as well. So if you are in the middle of a dispute with anybody within your family at the moment, get help, or not even help, or have somebody come in that can help mediate, can help you talk, that can help you have these conversations as early as possible before it becomes so fragmented it's completely broken down. And it's possible to do that as soon as you notice, and it's noticing that happening, which is so important.
And I think most families, they believe that what they do is, they do it in the best way. The biggest challenge in families is for them to admit that they need, having an outside help helps them, and sincerely helps them. It does not jeopardize neither their position nor the future of their families.
We're going to be elaborating on this in the next actually panel, so I'm going to save for that.
Okay.
But I think you hit the nail on the head, and as well yourself. It's all about communication, communication, communication. We do not communicate. We do not indulge the next gen into the business affairs. We actually take such a long time before we bring them when we think that we need to retire, and we bring them. It's too late. You have to make sure you have proper engagement. I'm also in the family office where I'm seeing the 4th gen. One of the things we try to do in the summer program is how do we have a 2 weeks collaborative effort, bringing as much as possible all the 4th gen and educating about the families. It was an eye-opener to them. It was the first time they attend something like that, a 2 weeks program. And the first week is all about teaching them about the family office. The next week, you won't believe, they started working. They actually started working. Some of them were in sales, making sales calls. Some of them in technology, interested in technology, started coding, which is amazing. You see the talent which is there? Untapped talent. So the earlier you engage them, and being part of the business, The early on, you get to know the talent. This is what Germans do very well, by the way. They scout talent at the age of 4 for anything. We need to do the same thing. We need to scout talent as early as possible so we can nurture them and guide them and coach them.
So one just there is always a confusion between engaging the new generation in the business and the fact that make sure that the new generation doesn't come into the business, make sure they're working outside. So one way to go around that approach is basically that instead of having them in the business itself from day one, assign them in certain committees or boards within the family itself and hold them accountable to what do there while they're doing their own business or their own normal day job outside. Let them take the experience for 5 or 10 years. Maybe not the whole family will be joining the family office eventually. I would agree with what you have said. But at the end of the day, some family members have to overlook the business of the family itself. Not the majority of the family members, but some of them. However, at the early stages, just onboard them on committees level or workshops or conferences so on, where they dictate exactly their own thoughts and ideas on the rest of the family, even the senior member of them.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've really appreciated your comments. It's been very enlightening. Thank you. If we could put our hands together. Thank you. Sorry, yes. Are there any questions from the audience at all?